another Sunday Riff Off. You've got Ashley Elizabeth Packard here.
Michelle Bryant from Colorado.
I love it. So, welcome to Transformational Truth Podcast, the place where there is an expectation-free space, and we are inviting you in to journey with us into the heart of transformational truth. And every couple of weeks, we spin a wheel, and this wheel is just filled with absolutely a ton of topics that we have that we get really excited about, that we feel like for personal reasons we need to dig into, but also just these things that we've seen people in our lives and just people on our journeys grapple with. And so we never are coming at you with all sorts of, solutions. We don't have everything figured out. But what we do know is that when we step into these spaces together, we are all 100% better. That's what we know. So we're going to spin this wheel. Rochelle, any thoughts, any ideas about where we're headed this week?
We are stepping out, not really stepping out, but stepping out of the topic being, finding your brave. And I really feel like I'm feeling another B word. I don't know. Like there was something just beautiful about the brave. And just like with every single one of these for 2 weeks, my whole self consciously and subconsciously really digs. So I don't know. I'm feeling like a word, like I'm seeing barriers. I'm seeing dig. I'm seeing doing this as being. I don't know. I'm just feeling like B's and D's might be in our future, but we'll see.
I love that so much. If you are looking at this wheel right now and you're seeing some of the topics that are on there and you're like, oh my gosh, I totally have a topic that I wish would be on this wheel, please drop that in the comments, shoot us a message. We really, really hope that you're in our Transformational Truth group on Facebook, because that's where a ton of the magic happens every time we spin this wheel. And so we're going to spin it. We're going to see what we're going to land on. And then you're going to get our real, raw, and very first initial reactions to what this topic is going to be. So here we go. We're going to spin this wheel. Shut up. Oh my God, it almost hit during the dig, which I think is really funny.
We're just talking about this before the riff off.
This is so true. So, all right, space for silence. And I'm like, I'm feeling this one pretty hard right now, because in everything that we've been doing, we've tackled so many different things in this podcast so far, and gone so many directions with all of it inside of our Facebook group. But making space for silence, I think, is such a cliche, because people want to say, well, we got to make space for silence. We got to do this. And I think it scares us all to death. I think there is so much of that people, they don't know what to do with silence. And I think it's so powerful. And it feels like a really good, really good sequel to How Big Is Your Brave? Because sometimes brave feels big and loud. Actually, I have a post all about this. This is totally in line with what I posted in our group today too. And it just isn't always that way. And sometimes when we're grappling with our brave, man, that silence is even more important. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So it's just so ironic, because I just shared with Ashley that I literally have taken off about 10, 11 days between May and June so that I can make space for silence. And literally right before we did this. And so it just feels very affirming that making that decision. I also talked about it today in a podcast that I was in terms of storytelling and the importance of sitting in your silence, your space with yourself, to gather your thoughts, to know what your truth is, to prepare for storytelling on any level. And I think that what terrifies us is spending time with ourselves. And it's so important, just as we schedule time to chat with other people. We need to schedule time to sit in silence, make space for silence for ourselves. And if you have to schedule that before it becomes a habit, then it's just so important. And why are we so afraid to be by ourselves in silence? And I know for myself, a lot of times I wake up first thing in the morning so that I have silence first thing in my day. And because I live with a lot of noisy people, and you'll hear music playing when they wake up or whatever. And so for me, it's really a place where good things happen.
Mm.
And I think that you need to be intentional with it and not be afraid that your mind is going to wander, because
Mhm.
that might be the very reason why you're in your silence. And give your space, let yourself space to cry. I mean, I think like a lot of emotions can come up in that. And I think that that's another thing that people are afraid of, is honoring feelings outside of the doing and the I'm okay and everything's great and I'm happy and
Yeah,
all that, because I think in silence is where you really have a lot of that transformational time
I would
for your.
agree. I even just hearing you say that, it is making me think. I know that for myself, just in my own journey, and I know a lot of people do this as well. When we have these big things that we're dealing with, and we have these big feelings, and we have whatever it is that we're going through, whether it's a struggle or whatever, a lot of us are very good at compartmentalizing, and we can get to the point where we're kind of, I don't know, in my head I always envision them in boxes, right? And it's like, okay, well, I don't have time or I don't have space to deal with this right now, even if it's simply like emotional capacity to deal with it, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be chaos around me. It can be chaos within me that makes me feel like I don't have capacity for this right now. But we tend to box these things up. And then I always envision like putting them on a shelf, right? And it's like, oh, okay, well, I'll come back to that later. And then before we know it, our shelf is full. And there's all these things that are up there. And when we sit in silence, that shelf starts to like feel really heavy, right? Or it starts to feel really cluttered. And then it feels like, okay, well, what happens though if now I'm pulling that down and I'm unpacking it? What's it going to take for me to put it all back in and put it back up there? And I think when it comes to silence, I think sometimes that's the fear, is like, well, what if these things that are coming out, if I'm not busy, if I'm not intellectually stimulated somehow, if I'm not right running from point A to point B, if I'm not doing something where I can feel really productive or I can feel like I'm making forward progress somehow, what happens if I'm just sitting with this thing or with this idea or with this feeling? What happens if that's just it? And what happens if I don't know what to do next? And I think there can be a lot there, but I think what you're talking about, where you talk about getting up and spending your morning in silence, there's so much of my mornings that I want silent, right? This is something that I feel like I've, not that I don't still avoid things or don't still compartmentalize, but I look forward to silences now, unlike I probably have ever done. And it continues to grow. It's like people who do meditation work. It's like the first time you do meditation, a lot of times whatever's happening up here feels really beyond what you can control, and how can I possibly focus on this thing? And then the longer you do it, the more you realize that it's like having a cool glass of water, right, on a really hot day, or however you want to look at it, because now it's like I know that that's where my peace is. I know that that's where things can settle out. I know I am safe enough to unpack whatever it is I put on my shelf, and I can bring it back and not have to be afraid.
I love that imagery. I was hanging out with the boxes and the shelves with you.
Well,
It's
I
so
just
important. I think there's a lot of filtering that
mm,
can happen in your space of silence, where, and for me, I have to put my phone away. I can't have my phone. And I think, with technology and everything, I remember as a kid sitting in silence a lot.
mm-hmm.
I didn't need that constant stimulation. I didn't need those is it endorphins or
Yeah. Yep. There's a
um
there's a hit of dopamine that comes with all of that. Yeah.
and we do it because we say we're doing it to be productive, but I can't tell you before I was intentional how many times I would just zone out to avoid things
Oh,
and have constant like input, like watching reels or TikToks or scrolling Facebook or what have you. And that when I gave myself permission to leave my phone, who's gonna like, why would my silent time be the time that everybody needs me? Like, who cares? You know, and that was part of my truth that I've been dealing with, you know, and at nighttime I plug my phone in and I don't even touch it. Like I don't want to recondition myself that I need to be stimulated, I need to have noise, I need to watch TV, I need to whatever. And a lot of times also with my bath time, that's where I sit in silence too. Though I do tend to play music in that space sometimes. But even like silence doesn't have to be the absence of noise. Silence can be the absence of distractions. It can be the absence of allowing your brain to go a million different directions. So I don't want you to think that silence is like the literal sense of silence, though that's what we've been talking a lot about. It can just be like a shift, a change, and super intentional. So
yeah. One almost like a narrowing down, right? Like I think about, I don't know, a little bit of what I was talking about earlier, kind of the absence of chaos, right?
Mhm.
We tend to, you were talking about busyness, all of those things, I don't know, a drive for productivity above everything else. I think there's a lot there where silence can be about just being. And I know that we've got some other topics that we're going to deal with later when the wheel spins and lands on those. But I think that, I don't know, I think there's something incredibly powerful about silence. Um, I don't know. I think there's a lot that is here. I think there's also a lot of opportunity, and I can just imagine what it's going to look like when you and I are creating this space in our group. And so, if you're not in this Facebook group yet, I can't invite you enough. Invite your friends, invite your people, come hang out with us. I think you're going to find that it is unlike any community that you are a part of. But when I think about what we are going to be putting together in here, I think a lot of it is going to be invitation to create that silent space and to figure out how to function in that silent space. And I don't know, to allow space for all of you to take up the silence and that's okay.
And I think the timing couldn't be better as so many of us are entering a a season of summer.
Mm,
And I feel like sometimes, I know for myself, summertime is a great time to pause
mm,
more and spend more time outside.
yeah.
And yeah, I love that this is approaching seasonally appropriateness of sitting outside in the silence or
Uh-huh.
listening to the crickets or the
Oh,
birds or wherever you live. I think that's some of the most magical time that you can create to sit in silence is outside in nature. But I live in Colorado in the mountains, so I get a lot of quietness.
I love that. I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to be a really good space. I think it's going to be some really good stuff to dig into here.
It always is. And you never know what value it's going to bring until you step into it for
Mm,
those 2 weeks and you just say, okay, I'm open and ready for whatever needs to happen. I think that's the attitude I've had throughout these months is just like, all right, I'm here for it. Let's go.
yeah,
Excited.
sign me up. Sign
You
me
have
up.
fun.
I love it. Well, Transformational Truth, we hope that you're going to come check out everything in our Facebook group. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please don't forget to like, share it, drop some comments for us. We would love to know what some of your initial thoughts are, and we cannot wait to continue growing with you. Take care. We'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Bye.